At the beginning, not at the end of the presentation. Waste. Actually, Hani just mentioned the word intrapreneur. I spent most of my life working as a social intrapreneur. So I worked in companies for a very long time, trying to create change, and especially trying to create change for things I was passionate about. I kept seeing opportunities to do things differently. I kept seeing opportunities for improvement, and the thing that felt really purposeful for me was actually working on sustainability-related topics, making the world a little bit better and using business as a vehicle for change. Actually, this is my experience of being a stakeholder without a voice inside an organization. And from there, I actually learned how do you influence for change? How do you make things happen? And I think that's where my interest in stakeholders started, understanding them, listening to them. I work with an organization here called S360. We work to support businesses in their sustainability strategies. And instead of really designing the strategies, to be honest, what I do is I really focus on how to bring it to life, how to make it happen. I think this is the art. And we heard from our colleague that you can have the most beautiful plans, and if you don't engage people in the right way, they can fall down. Let's start with the definition of stakeholders very quickly. A stakeholder is anybody who's affected by or will have an effect on a change program or an organization. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of a company. So the stakeholders of my company are everybody who has an impact on me and who I have influence over. And in Management 1.0, this one very special stakeholder is the shareholder, the company owner, the senior management. And in a way, traditionally, everything's been geared to that model. What we've come to realize, now it being the 21st century, is there's a lot of diversity in who your stakeholders are. You need to look and identify them, understand them, and actually really listen to them. What are they saying? What are they trying to tell you? In my case, I was the employee with lots of ideas, saying, I have ideas for doing things differently. But nobody was asking. What actually has also changed, and I think this is interesting, is in general, we have always focused on the shareholder and profit maximization in organizations. It's a necessity, and it's also a basic principle. But what if we would realize that now this is not the only stakeholder, shareholder is not the only stakeholder, and you can no longer make decisions behind closed doors. You can no longer keep information. Social media helps everything be transparent and quick. And actually, at the same time, all the issues that are faced by organizations, by all of us, are becoming more and more complex. Water scarcity, climate change, human rights, obesity, there are very many global issues taking place, and none of them are simple to solve. None of them just have a black and white solution. You cannot use a management approach to solve those issues anymore. Did anybody follow the news last weekend? There was the biggest climate march in history. Almost 400,000, somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 people marched in New York City. It was the biggest climate action ever. And it didn't just happen in New York. It happened in Istanbul. Some of you might have been there, I don't know, perhaps. But it definitely happened in all the cities around the world. And this is a way of showing stakeholders, whether you see them or not, are taking a voice. They're saying, listen to us. This is something we care about. And they're going to continue to be louder until you as management, you as somebody who can do something, is going to pay attention. So in a way, Management 1.0 is outdated, because this is not something you can plan or something you can control. So is not predictable. Social media is also playing a really interesting role. Avaz.org is a way to raise awareness around key issues. It's a crowdsourcing platform. So they're not raising funds, but they're raising votes. They're raising voices together to say, if you care about this issue, tell the people who have influence about it that it matters to you. Together we have a strong voice. In this case, and this was one that actually arrived in my email box this morning, so I thought it was timely. There's a petition right now. In 5 days' time, the US is going to ban the use of deadly pesticides that are killing the honeybees, and the bees, as you know, are part of the whole ecosystem. And I think it was Einstein who said if the bees don't exist within 3 years or so, humanity will cease, or human species will be out. We're very dependent on them. And the petition is saying, give your voice, help us to stop the lobby that's coming against this, to allow big business to continue selling these pesticides. Tell them that it matters. So it's an interesting thing, and here in Turkey there's also a new platform called dirençevre.org. It's people around the country saying, here is something we would like to give voice to it. We would like you to see that in this community things are not happening in a way that we're happy with. KitKat, perhaps you've seen this campaign a few years ago. The KitKat brand was under attack because of the sourcing of palm oil. Palm oil is one of the key ingredients in confectionery, and they're sourcing it from Indonesia. And their supplier, so it has nothing directly to do with KitKat, but their supply chain was actually contributing to the destruction of rainforest orangutan habitat. And Greenpeace led a campaign. And so what happened, they made a video, and some people started watching it, and then Nestle with management 1.0 style came in and said, take that off, we demand you to remove that from the internet. And so what was the consequence? It went viral. People wanted to see what are they trying to hide. 1 million plus hits immediately. So this is kind of what's happening is we're between management 1.0 and management 2.0. We're not quite yet understanding how to interact with our stakeholders. So there's this kind of dance taking place. I think the millennials, the next generation, understand already. The challenge we face is that management is trained in management 1.0, but yet we're operating now in management 2.0. And what does management 2.0 look like? Well, we're working within complexity, complex times. You cannot use command and control anymore. You cannot really use management by fear anymore. Complexity and the issues I mentioned, like climate change, water, they cannot be solved alone. They cannot be solved by one single approach. It's not a problem to solve in a linear way. You cannot jump from the problem to the solution with what we know now. Actually, you need to work with very unusual, different collaborators, different stakeholders, and involve them. So I think the problem-solving style 1.0 would be simple problems. It's hot, turn on the heat. It's dark, turn on the light. Or complicated problems, how to build the Airbus, that beautiful Airbus we saw before. That's a very complicated problem. But if you get the best engineers in the world and you have the best laid plans, you can make it happen. Complexity is different. You cannot manage it and plan it in the same way. You actually need a different approach. And this is the world we live in now, a complex one. In some ways, instead of jumping from A to B, you take a slightly longer way around. You listen first. And you spend a lot of time listening. You find your stakeholders. You ask them, what does this mean to you? And you involve them in the process before you can really understand the complexity. And what you do, and you're going to hear about this through the piece on design thinking after this, I believe, is you work together. You don't then say thank you for your input, I've got it. You keep them as part of the project. You move forward together. This is a new mindset that's needed. So, as I was this change agent, I was also writing my thesis, and I was exploring how can you manage change for sustainability in organizations. And what I found out is you cannot. Manage change is a paradox. It doesn't make sense. You can lead change, you can facilitate change, but you cannot manage it. So when you start engaging with your stakeholders, and by the way, you can't manage your stakeholders either, and this is something ING Bank did in the Netherlands for their global stakeholders. They said, actually, we realize we need to understand what they're asking from us so that we can respond, or at least preempt any kind of attack that will come on us or demand that will come to us. So they mapped their stakeholders and they understood what are they actually each asking? What do they want? What are their interests? And this not only is transparent because it's available for everyone to see, it's also transparent in showing the dilemma. One wants this, one wants the exact opposite. So it's an easier way to interact in a transparent way and let each other know, is it possible or not? And in a way, this is a way to interact with your stakeholders. Many companies have started calling them together into the room and actually leading the conversation with their stakeholders, because that conversation is going to happen anyway. And the company who's not at the table with their stakeholders is going to get left behind. So, or there will be big questions, why are they here? And it will create a lot of resistance. This is the concept I want to share with you, is the resistance line. So if I'm a stakeholder and a decision is being made that's going to have an effect on me, and I'm not part of the process of making that decision, or I haven't been informed beforehand, I start behaving in these ways. And I'm sharing this with you as managers and leaders because this is a really useful diagnostic tool. When you see these things happening in your team, in your organization, know that stakeholders, employees, colleagues, business partners are not feeling involved in something that's going to affect them. So what happens first? Well, it might not be easy or safe to tell your, let's say your big boss, your major stakeholder, your CEO, that's a really silly idea. So you might make a joke about it, or you might make excuses for why you didn't do something he asked you to do. And usually this is the one I see most often in the companies, is an announcement is made, here's what's going to happen, and everyone goes to the coffee machine after the meeting and has a good gossip. Can you believe it? And nobody said no in the meeting. We all nodded our heads and said yes. But then afterwards in the coffee break, we're all sort of telling our true sentiments. And what happens in time, and you know, this is not linear, but in time, communication starts to break down because conflicts start to rise, you know? And you might even start disrupting or going slow, sort of doing it, but really slowly, so nobody can say you didn't do it. Now, what happens eventually is strike. So this example, like Nestle and Greenpeace went on strike against Nestle, actually, right, with the Kit Kat. They said, you're not hearing us, you're not hearing us, you're not hearing us, we're going to do a campaign against you. The same thing happens in organizations. You know, I'm disengaged, I quit, I got a new job. These things happen again and again and again. So I'm sharing this with you because it should be useful for you. I hope you have something to take away with you after today and realize, okay, I need to engage with this person or this group of people who are not on the same page. I think that's a valuable way of looking at it, especially if you're a manager. You don't want things to get as inefficient and ineffective as they will if you leave things unresolved. But this is actually why stakeholders, or why stakeholder engagement matters, is you're giving a voice to those points of view that otherwise you might have been ignoring. And if you ignore them, if you ignore the feedback or the wisdom or the information, in time it's going to cause you problems. So the sooner you listen, the better. The hard part is actually engaging with such a different point of view to your own, with somebody who's fundamentally saying the opposite. You might have a big majority of people, you're ready to run with your Kmart IT implementation. I don't know to use the example from before, but there's a reason why it didn't work. How do you actually engage with those alternative points of view? I think the most important step, the first step, is you start listening. You actually let it be okay to hear other points of view. So if I'm now a company and I'm doing stakeholder engagement, I'm actually not just announcing my plans, I'm also able to hear the feedback. And I'm going to listen also to the alternative points of view. Very often we're looking to hear things that confirm what we already know, that we're on the right track. And when somebody says, yes, but, you actually just want them not to be there. You want them to go away. You really don't want to hear that voice, right? Because it's going to slow everything down, put a spanner in the works. I want you to think differently about that voice now. Think of that voice as a stakeholder who actually has very valuable information. So what he's doing is saying, yes, but, and you don't want to hear it, but there is information there that's going to be valuable. And if you don't hear it now, it's going to come back later, and it's going to get louder and louder and louder. And when one person says, yes, but, and we all know who that is, because there's a typical person who's always getting in the way, and we wish, oh, if only that person wasn't there today, everything would be fine. Don't scapegoat him or her. They're saying it on behalf of the whole group. Find out and realize other people are thinking the same thing as well. And here's the key. Here's the beautiful question you can ask to your stakeholder who thinks differently to you. Maybe you've already decided you're going to do something, you know, a business has to be efficient and move. But you can ask, okay, if you have an opposing view, I need you to know this is what we're going to do. But it seems you know something that we're not paying attention to. What do you need to come along with that decision? What do you need to come along? Instead of them saying don't do it, they're going to give you something constructive. And this is what stakeholder engagement looks like at its best. So, what would your employees say? I wanted to ask if you would ask them, what do you want? Often we believe they will say, I want more money. The survey just came out that said if you're a millennial, and this is 84% of millennials around the world, they'll tell you they want more meaning in their work. They don't just want the money. They don't just want the promotion. They want meaning. There's a beautiful piece of work, if you're interested in the subject, by an author called Dan Pink. He did a research he wrote a book called Drive, and it's called The Surprising Truth About What Really Motivates Us. And he found out it's three things. Purpose, autonomy. So purpose, having meaning in the work that you do, or finding purpose in what you do. Autonomy, so being able to make your own path, not to be micromanaged, but to be able to make your own choices. And mastery, which means getting better at something, feeling that you're improving yourself over time. So if you would ask your employees as a stakeholder, what do you need or want? It might be something not just money. And money is an issue, but when money is no longer an issue, when enough is there, those are the things people ask for. Meaning, autonomy, and mastery. And if nature had a voice, if nature was a stakeholder, what would it tell us? And it's really interesting. We've learned a lot from nature. Velcro, you know, that's on your shoes and on your jackets and things, is because of nature. Because nature told us that this is how seeds get distributed. And we just copied nature and had a brand new example. It's about looking in different places and bringing in those different innovations. So to wrap up and to conclude, I think that we're all stakeholders actually. And I learned to give myself a voice in the company I worked in before, and eventually I didn't want to work there anymore. But I spent a lot of time in my life asking other people, what do you need? What do you want? What is it you're saying? To make it visible. Because if it's not visible, then we go onto that resistance line. And if it's not visible, you know, what if we don't listen? What if we don't listen? I'm concerned about issues of sustainability. I'm concerned about the future. We saw that 400,000 people in New York City or two, they have a voice. So what is it you're concerned about? Please voice it, and please ask other people their opinion. That's Stakeholder 2.0. Thank you very much.